Welcome to the True Life Balance Podcast. My name is Brad Lancaster.
And my name is Tiffany Lancaster. And this is a podcast about relationships and deep connection.
And this is a podcast about health and fitness.
And this is a podcast about consciousness and purpose.
And this is a podcast about business, sales, marketing, entrepreneurship. In other words, it's a podcast about everything that we care about. So come along for the ride and hope you enjoy.
In this episode, we are interviewing Matt and Ash. They are the yoga couple. They are the authors of the bestseller, The Inner Work. That is the book they wrote. I highly recommend checking that out. It is amazing. They're also the founders of the Chakra Yoga Institute, which is their yoga teacher training. They also have an online community of over 500,000 people. And you can also find them on the Inner Work podcast. We love this conversation. We hope that you guys enjoy it too. We get really deep into consciousness, themes of consciousness, the hard inner work and relationships. And it was a really great conversation. This one's going to be a little longer, but we hope that you guys find this one valuable. Enjoy. Okay, so today we are introducing Matt and Ash, the yoga couple. We are super, super excited to talk with them. They are the best-selling authors of the book, The Inner Work, the founders of the Sacred Yoga Institute, which Brad and I are both enrolled in, and we're super excited about it. They have an online community of over 500,000 people. And you also have the Inner Work podcast. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. We're actually just now bringing back our podcast. So this is really special and timely for us to kind of warm up before we get ramped up again.
Awesome. Okay, so one of the first things I wanted to do is kind of just talk about how we found you guys and how almost synchronistic and divine it was for us to come across you guys.
Yeah, we would love to hear that.
Okay. So I found yoga. Brad and I have a crazy story, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. But I came across you guys. Basically, I'll get into it a little bit. I decided to get my yoga teacher training while Brad was spending 8 months in jail.
Wow.
To take up some time while running our business and taking care of our kids. And so I went through.
She didn't have enough to do, so she thought she'd become a certified yoga instructor as well. Yeah.
I felt like it was the most important work that I could do while he was gone. But anyway, when Brad came home, I was super excited about everything that I had learned in yoga and was like, how do I get this through to Brad? And so we started going to a lot of yoga festivals and eventually took our kids to yoga festivals. And we went to Wanderlust in Hawaii. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. And I started thinking like, what would it be like if we were like the yoga couple? If we were to like market ourselves as the yoga couple? We're not even us. You guys are definitely the yoga couple. But I was looking up, is that a thing? Is somebody the yoga couple? And you guys totally came up. And so I started following
That
you.
is wild.
Right?
Dude, same wavelength.
I know.
Exactly.
So crazy. And then after doing the Namaste Together challenge with you guys, like Ash, you and I have such similar stories of our childhood, very, very similar. And Brad was raised in the LDS church, and that is his biggest trauma. So anyway, I thought, yeah. So we just thought, man, these people, you guys are seriously like our gurus in every sense.
Yeah, it sounds like we're doppelgangers, like
We got some
cosmic twins.
same backgrounds for sure.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. So it's been awesome. What do you want to start with some of your questions? Or?
Oh my gosh. Well, the first thing I wanted to do, like you guys have spent so much time and you do such a great job of like sharing the message of the inner work. And before we go any further, anybody listening, like if you are on this journey of, I love how I believe at the start of the book, it says anybody who's just like looking to live a happy life, this book is for you. Is that right? Is that?
Yeah.
It's on the back cover.
It's on the back cover.
If you're a
the
human.
final little tagline
if you're a human.
was, if you're human and you want to be happy, this book is for you.
Yeah. And after I read it, which was just a couple months ago and finished it, I told Tiff, like, this is, and I don't mean to embarrass you guys, but like, this is my new Bible. This is the thing that I can explain so much of personal growth.
Amazing.
It explains so much of, like, I legitimately keep it by my bedside. So when I am triggered, and I'm not kidding, guys. Like I have a trigger. I go to it. I'm like, okay, I'm in the theme of consciousness of anger right now. What is this telling me? What am I, where do I need to go to work?
And you guys, you can't believe how big this is because of the spiritual trauma that he's experienced. He thought I was joining a cult with yoga. He was like, I don't want to, like, that's just weird. I don't want to, I'll do the yoga classes with you, but that's it. You know,
I kept it at a very, like I'll do the stretches and I'm good with breathing. Breathing's good.
But don't give me the spiritual. I'm not
part.
trying to do that again.
Yeah. You start talking to me about the divine, about connection to source, about all this stuff. I'm like, whatever, I'll move on. So anyway, I wanted to say that first, that the inner work and the book is, if you are on this path of healing, the other thing I love is you guys preface it with this almost not a warning, but like a clear delineation. If you're not ready to look at some deep, dark shit, don't come here. I love that.
I mean, that's definitely the goal.
Yeah, we actually put that in from feedback that we were getting because it was triggering to some people. And we were like, you know what? I think it would just be good to just flat out say, like, if you're not ready to look at yourself and own like the parts of you that you project, you know, outside, like it's always everybody else's fault. If you're not ready to see that in yourself, like do not even pick this book up because it's just not the time. You know?
We added that in actually as we, I think like year 2 of the book being out, we were like, you know, like for example, there were people who were upset that it was so spiritual. And then there was people that were getting triggered. So we said, all right, we're going to do a trigger warning. We're going to say, this is a super spiritual book and it's going to help you heal and look at some shit. So the whole goal was, actually to help attract the right people by actually being really, really clear about who is not our people.
Yes.
And that was an interesting thing in our business life too, of, you know, in business or even in our personal lives, we often think that if we get too specific, we might be eliminating a lot of people. And so in business, especially, we feel like maybe we shouldn't do that.
We should just make it for everybody.
You know, we should be really broad and be really welcoming to everybody. And it's like, well, actually, it actually hurts the business or it hurts the message more because then you start attracting people that really shouldn't be there.
It's not for them. Yeah.
And we also saw this, you know, with other things that we were doing where, you know, if you get people who are not ready for that, they actually can throw off the whole vibe. They can ruin experiences for other people. And then you realize that, wow, this is actually hurting us. Yeah, exactly.
So now we're just bold.
Now we're just
like,
bold.
This book is not for you.
This is for people who actually want lasting change. I think we updated the synopsis of it to be like, this is for people who have read self-help books. They're not making progress. They want to know BS, like straight to the point, you know, breakdown. Like, let's go, you know?
I feel like we've learned this lesson the really hard way by like saying, oh, everybody can be a part of our organization. We'll help you become self-developed. We'll, take you in and give you these opportunities. And then we would hire these people that would just be super triggered by everything that we would do. And that like, even just like, I don't know. We've had employees like complain that in our meetings, we talk about all this woo-woo stuff and that we're always expected to have a positive attitude, which obviously isn't the truth. But I relate to that. It's taken us a while to figure that one out, that we just have to be very clear about the theme of consciousness.
Just own it.
Hey, can I ask you guys a question? Speaking about your book, I'm curious, have you guys recorded it for Audible yet? Have you?
That is like the highest agenda right now. Now that we're back from India, that's our highest goal right now.
Because as I read it, and this is just totally me telling you guys, I'm like, okay, is that Matt or Ash's voice that's coming through? and at different times, I can hear both of your voices, and I can hear like the back and forth, and that's just something that I consider myself so fortunate because I've been able to sit in workshops with you guys, and as intimate workshop as a Zoom can be, because it's been like your ability to get through that. Anyway, thank you so much.
Love hearing that.
Yeah, it's good to hear though.
It's been so good because he read your guys' book because we just ordered one copy at first. I'm going through it now, but he's been like teaching me a lot of the concepts, which I understand a lot of the concept, but it's been such a great shift. I love it.
That's cool.
Aw, that's so beautiful. So it's like you started initiating like, hey, like get into this yoga world. And like now he's like teaching you.
He's like, do you know what theme of consciousness that looks like to me? And I'm like, tell me.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about your guys' origin story, because you guys, one of the cool things you talk about is the hero's journey, and every hero has an origin. Like, and it's one of my favorite stories, whatever the hero is, and it's one of the great themes of storytelling. So, do you guys mind sharing like your origin story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess I'll start with. So my whole thing was my whole life I was striving to be a doctor, and basically from, a little kid, I really ran with it. It was the classic dad planting the seed of you should be a doctor, son. I think, he saw that I was good in school, so he really, really pushed it. And so I ran with it. And then about when I was in high school, we moved and I was getting really bored because I knew this was like a super long journey. So I graduated high school at 15 and started college, and really wanted to get going on this 13-year like medical journey. And anyway, fast forwarding now, got my bachelor's in psychology, was really drawn to that. Once I realized I could study technically anything, I was really drawn to that as long as I hit those med school prereqs. So getting in eventually, fast forwarding now, like say 5 years, I get into naturopathic medical school, and I get there, and then I call up my dad. I'm like, after the first semester, I'm like, it's really cool, but I'm not happy. And I don't really see myself doing this conventional route of medicine. I think I'm drawn to, spirituality and other forms of healing. And I had this really amazing experience with learning about mind-body medicine. And I learned about the placebo effect. And that really fascinated the living heck out of me. The idea that we can give humans a pill or even fake surgeries, and their body will have a physiological response that should not happen from reason and logic, right? So from reason and logic, nothing should be happening. If I give you a saline pill, but your body will have a healing effect, your tumors will dissolve, your bones will reconstruct. It's like, this stuff is like, it was mind blowing to me. So I left medical school and then wanted to become more of like a therapist and a mind body healer then. Went into a master's program. I don't know, I'm like 22 at this point or something, 23. And then same thing, I realized that even if you give someone all the healthiest mental strategies, if they don't have a greater spiritual context for their life, they'll still suffer. So for me, my hero's journey was to become the ultimate healer in alleviating human suffering. That was my quest. And I realized that you go through the body, you realize that you can give someone the healthiest body, but if their mind isn't healthy, they'll still suffer. Okay, so I was like, all right, let's study the mind. So then you give someone the healthiest body and mind, but if they don't have a greater spiritual context, death and change and things like this will always stress us out, and they'll always create suffering. So I'm like, all right, so then we got to go to spiritual. All right, fine, then let's do that. So then finally left that master's program and then wanted to devote myself to full-time study of consciousness. And I wanted to focus on those things. So I got into like quantum physics for a while. And then I found my teacher, Dr. David Hawkins, who is an MD PhD around this topic of merging consciousness with the greater spiritual and healing journeys. And that's really what inspired the entire inner work, is coming from that world, from this study of consciousness. And then of course, yoga was a massive part of that, because as soon as I started diving into studies of human consciousness, of course, yoga became a massive source of knowledge that I was gravitated towards reading about and learning about. And then right around that time is when Ash comes into the picture as the yoga master. So now we'll kind of see how she fuses into that.
Yeah. I met Matt. I was already a yogi. So I had been in college studying Eastern religion and philosophy because I wanted to deepen my understanding of yoga and this whole concept that he's talking about it really just comes down to consciousness. Like everything in our reality is consciousness. So just go straight to the source and go into that Eastern spirituality studies. And we really vibed on that. You know, we had this like shared passion for the spiritual aspect and how that related to the human condition and relationships and, you know, mental mindset and self-healing. So I grew up in Las Vegas and my mom was addicted to narcotics. My dad was a functioning alcoholic that I didn't really know until my adult years because the focus was always on my mom being a drug addict, that I didn't even realize my dad was actually like this open alcoholic that just wasn't getting that attention wasn't on him because it was always on my mom. So now later in my adult life, I'm like, wow, okay. So I was raised by a narcotics addict and an alcoholic. And I grew up in a kind of dysfunctional environment because of that. You know, there was a lot of trauma, a lot of chaos, a lot of instability. And growing up in Las Vegas, that was kind of the norm of my like core friend group, broken homes, like addictions, gambling. You know, I remember being a little girl and being in my friend's house and her dad was watching porn on the TV in the living room with us just like playing. Like it was just, I was around constant, just overexposure to sex, overexposure to drugs, overexposure to alcoholism, just all around me. And as a young girl, like that really, I felt that spiritually. Like I didn't grow up spiritually. I didn't grow up with a religion, but I felt something was off. Like I knew this wasn't healthy. This wasn't stable. And I think I yearned for something more pure, where I felt more safe, where I felt like, like that comfort of just, I don't know what that word is, but wholesomeness. I wanted wholesomeness in my life. And I had so many questions about, you know, God and why are we here? And my parents couldn't answer that because they didn't have a connection to that themselves. So when I was 16 years old and I got my driver's license, I wrote down all my questions about life and death and God and existence. And I interviewed different churches and religions in Las Vegas. I went to the Christians, the Buddhists, the Hindus, all the different, you know, Jehovah's Witness. I mean, I went everywhere. And I started studying with multiple religions at once from my teenage years until basically meeting Matt. I was going to, you know, kirtans, which are like Hindu chanting stuff and reading the Bhagavad Gita. And then I was going to like this mega Christian church and doing Bible study. And like, I was doing all of it. I was going to the Buddhist temple and I got really fascinated with yoga. Like yoga really stood out to me. Hinduism, yoga, Eastern spirituality really hooked me in more than anything else. So I decided that I was going to study Eastern religion in college and studied at UNLV with Asian studies as my focus and got to do like my projects on like yoga history and, you know, that mind-body connection Matt is talking about. Mm-hmm. And I dove really far into it. I did my yoga teacher training. And at 23, 24 years old, I opened a yoga franchise. I was a cocktail, you know, bottle service. I was doing bottle service at Marquee Nightclub and Day Club to save money for her yoga so that studio. I could open a yoga studio. So I was all so up great. In the Vegas like industry, but I was a yogi and I was just so focused and I was saving my tips. And I opened a yoga studio, won Best of Las Vegas. Then 2 years later, I opened my second yoga studio at 25 years old. I was getting scouted by major franchises to go, which we ended up doing, travel and open their yoga franchises all over the country and train their teachers. And I was just vibing. So my history is that my hero's journey is that I came from a family that had no connection to spirituality. My mom was a drug addict. My dad was an alcoholic. I didn't grow up with anything spiritual. And it actually drove me into the direction of wanting to be the exact opposite of what I grew up with. And in that journey, my mom has now gotten clean because she, adopted a raw vegan diet to self-heal. She got off her drugs. She started doing yoga. My dad has now read the Inner Workbook like a dozen times. I actually just had a phone call with him and my mom yesterday, and they were telling me about their childhood trauma that created the behaviors that I grew up with, and how like they're transforming through the inner work. My parents are completely different people now because of the influence, of the inner work of yoga. And we have such a beautiful relationship. My mom is clean. My dad shows me on Zooms. He'll be like, look, this is a non-alcoholic beer. And he'll show it to me. And they're making so much progress. And we have such a beautiful relationship now because it's just full circle.
That is so cool. Oh my gosh. That is so amazing.
I had no idea. I mean, you guys have shared little bits and pieces of thank you so much for sharing that. That is so beautiful. Both. So a ton of questions come up for me, but I'm the person that's always stepping on Tiff. So
go for it.
So Matt, I'm going to go to you first because I feel so much. First of all, like you are, I want to say to so many men that listen, look, here's a man that's like by any stretch of the imagination, accomplished, successful. You've got a successful marriage. This is an example of a way to live a really fulfilled, happy life. But there's obviously trauma that goes into it. You speak to some really deep, painful things, and you're not afraid to speak about it. One of the first times I saw you where I thought, I've got to take this to my boys, is Tiff was showing me when a while ago you were going like really deep into porn addiction. And your own porn addiction. And while that's not anything that I ever like dealt with deeply at a deep level, any male in the United States has at some point had to address pornography. Right. And then if you step on top of that, any religious, like strong religious background, whether it be the Mormon religion, any like strict Christian religion, Western religion that has that theme of like, the whole
shaming
thing starts.
Shame and guilt around sexuality. Yeah.
Shame and guilt. Well, and like if you go deep, like shame and guilt around existence, you were born into sin, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's a hard thing. So, so how do you, so many questions. How do you reconcile, or how do you work with, tell me about your work with men that are especially going through addiction issues. Like where does somebody start? We work with addicts. We have that connection in our family. Where does somebody start?
Yeah, great question. I think that one of the most important things is to develop the person's why. So the reason why I say that is because if the why isn't strong enough, they'll never succeed, because overcoming addiction, at least in my experience, is probably one of the hardest things that we can do in life. And in fact, I would even say that the entire inner work journey is just overcoming addiction, whether it's addiction to thoughts, belief systems, or a substance. Everything about our healing and spiritual journey is technically overcoming addictions to our own ego. And so I think the biggest reason, whether it's someone, wanting to be free from a substance or wanting to go on their spiritual journey or healing journey, it's technically the same. You need the same level of passion to be like, I have to do this. I need to do this because it's like imperative to my soul. So I think the first step is the person needs to develop a really strong why. So for me, it was, I don't like the idea of being on my deathbed and looking back at my life and seeing who I could have been and be like, damn, I didn't even get close. Like I didn't even try. I didn't even go for it. Because one thing's for sure, I'd rather try my absolute hardest and fail. At least when I look back on my life, I can say, well, shit, I went for it. Right. And I really tried. And then versus being like, well, I didn't even try to do that at all. So for example, that's one of my big whys is I don't like the idea of I left a bunch off the table. Like I didn't even go for it. So I think one of the biggest things when it comes to addiction is they have to see, okay, what's my why? So why do I even want to be free of this? How is this hurting me and limiting me? Because they have to see that, because obviously you're not going to stop if you don't see that it's causing a problem. So developing your why in the positive direction, seeing the negative of how it's limiting that why. And then from there, starting to just take baby steps to start addressing it. And then ideally the concept is that as we get started, you'll start to build momentum, and your why will keep driving you through the slip ups, drive you through the times where you slip and fall. However, you'll keep learning and keep growing. And then you get motivated by that, because progress is what feels best as humans. We enjoy progress. It's not about a destination. It's a sensation of progress that makes us feel so fulfilled.
Witnessing you overcome several addictions, I think one of the things I've heard you say often is like, you don't like knowing that something has power over you, like something outside of you can manipulate you, guide you, kind of have control over you. I feel like you've mentioned multiple times that one of the reasons that you've been successful is because you feel really strongly that you want to have complete power over your will. And that an addiction is like this, thing behind you that's constantly you're surrendering and being subservient to. And that idea of that you're subservient to something that you can't say no to made you feel like you had a weakness that really drove you like to be like, F that. Like, I'm not going to be so weak that there's something that I can't say no to. It's like, it's so tempting that I don't even have the discipline to stop it. Like that, I think, was one of the huge motivating factors of when he realized that he was giving his control and power away, his will, to something else. I think that really tripped you out. And I think also the reason why you've been so successful in your healing because of the inner work is that you've had extreme compassion for why you even developed an addiction, knowing that it comes from childhood trauma and repressions, and like having this grace for yourself that it's not like something to be ashamed of, like, especially with pornography, right? Like who comes out and just is open about like that? That's like that's such a stereotype of like just being shameful. And to just have this immense compassion for yourself that you were an innocent, like 14-year-old boy who was just curious because you felt sexually repressed by religion. And that just developed into a habit that you weren't aware of at that time. The ability to see it that way, like as this, like really, it's not your fault. It just kind of happened because of the circumstances and the way you responded, and you're innocent. I feel like that's why you've been so successful at healing, is because you've had that grace for yourself.
Yeah. With men in particular on that part, there's like so many things we could go into on this. I could literally obviously talk about it for hours, but I would say, since Ash brought that up, with men in particular, they do tend to respond to the fact that something is limiting their power. And because the male psyche wants to feel ultimately admired, respected, and powerful and capable. So what I usually will leverage whenever I was, say, working with someone as an individual is I find out which of those do they really value the most. And then I help them see that the addiction is crippling it. So if they're like someone who really wants to feel powerful, like Ash is saying, then we lean into that. If they want to feel really respected, I'll be like, well, dude, this is totally ruining your respect. If they want to feel really like admired by their wife or their partner, I'll be like,
it's well, like use your partner ego.
Yeah. So my favorite thing is to use the ego in our advantage, because it's a pretty damn strong primal force. We should use it to our advantage when we can, because it's the urge to survive, and it's been keeping our species alive for a long time. So we should use it cleverly against itself, like that's kind of how I love to do that. So you lean into whatever the person values the most, and then we use that as the leverage of, hey, this thing is weakening that. And then the other thing that popped up too was, it is important to understand whenever we're healing anything, like whether it's in the teacher training or our workshops or in the book, you guys have probably heard it so many times. We're constantly reiterating this idea that every bit of human suffering is not personal. It's not yours.
Right.
It's imperative in the healing journey to understand that this is not you.
Right.
It's not you. It's so true.
Like you're behaving in this self-sabotaging way as a coping mechanism and a defense to the environment and the circumstances you were faced with. And at a time, that's what kept you alive, and it was useful until it's not anymore.
Yeah. Well, I have a question about that. So when you have an addiction, whether it be food or say if it's like weed or some other sort of plant medicine or something that could potentially have a positive effect on someone if they were to, approach it from a more conscious place, even if it's like a glass of wine or, dessert or whatever. Like when you're dealing with addiction, how do you know that you're healed enough to the point that, maybe if there's a positive effect on something, you would, like if you were an alcoholic, would it ever be okay to have a glass of wine or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think it comes down to self-awareness of how are you if you can't have it? So how are you if you can't have access to it? When you're triggered, how are you if you can't get that thing? Are you reliant on it instead of facing the trigger? Yeah. If you're triggered and you have to go to a thing to self-soothe, that is an avoidance of doing the work.
Or it just means it owns you.
Yes.
Right.
So it's different to have something casually as a place of pleasure and freedom, right? Yeah. That's like having a glass of wine from a place of freedom versus I had a really stressful day and I can't deal with it and I need a glass of wine to decompress because I don't know how to self-regulate.
Yeah, I think another simple way for people to think about it is you'll know you're healed when you don't have a charge towards it. Like it'll just be really nonchalant.
Like if we took it away, would you freak out?
Yeah, like my teacher Hawkins always worded it as if at any point you had to stop, you wouldn't have a reaction. So if you're eating the cake and then someone was like, "Oh, that's all you get," you'd be like, "All right."
Or
whatever.
a better one would be a cleanse.
Yeah,
like if you could you do a 2-week cleanse or a month cleanse and would that trip you out?
Whatever. Or would you
like this is so effing hard? Or would it be like enjoyable?
Yeah, or would you not mind? It's like not having a charge if it comes or goes is maybe a really simple way to think about it.
I love that.
Well,
no attachment and no clinging and no aversion either. Because on the flip side, we can also get addicted to an aversion, right? Like we've gone through phases of this where we're so strict because we're trying to overcome like an ego addiction. Let's say it's wine drinking, right? We could become so strict about it that too becomes an aversion. It's like, it's this middle way of like, you're not pushing something away so strongly because that you're still an addict if you have to push it away that strongly.
Yeah, it still controls
because
you.
It controls you. And that's a fine phase to be in, but to live there in a constant place of extreme aversion.
That's not the end.
That means you have a fear with this thing that it's going to consume or control you as soon as you have a taste. And it's like, okay, like that's not healthy either. So extreme aversion and people who get really rigid with the diets and really, really rigid with like rules. Yeah. That's the flip side of the same coin of being hyper addicted to something.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I've just found myself like saying, okay, I'm like cutting out sugar or cutting out wine, because we don't drink often, but once in a while we'll have a glass of wine. But I'm like, because I can't give it up forever, does that mean it's a problem? Like,
No,
not at all.
Well, you guys, the other, to highlight an insight you gave me through the Namaste Challenge or the Namaste Together Challenge was the coping, when you were using something for coping. So I came to this realization when did we do that? In February, right?
Yeah.
That I was using THC as a coping mechanism where I thought I was just like it's now legal in Utah and you can have a prescription. And I was like, hey, I'm just using this to deal with my anxiety and it's cool.
And knee replacement. He did have.
Knee replacement.
So we are into natural medicine. I had so we're a second marriage. I had 3 from my first and got divorced. He had 4 from his first marriage. And then we got married and decided to have another for 8. So we have 8, which is crazy. But, the last one that we had together, we did a completely like natural birth. And that's where I feel like for both of us, that's where spirituality it played a huge role in that. But Brad got to this point where he felt like he was having knee issues, got a knee replacement surgery that he wishes he would have maybe put a little more intention into. But anyway, just going along that natural path of healing, he decided he would use THC because he also had a relative that got addicted to opiates. So he right after the surgery was prescribed opiates, and like he had this crazy experience where I started recognizing that he was definitely like his whole personality was changing. Like he became hyper focused on when the next time he could take the next pill was, like counting down the minutes, and then just became a completely different person. So he did, as soon as I pointed it out to him, he was like, whoa, like, yeah, I was totally doing that and quit taking those. But then would still deal with pain.
It wasn't quite that easy. There was actually a little bit of a weaning off, and then a final day where like I went completely off of them. Anyway, so I started using THC, right? And then I realized I was using it for pain, but then I realized I was using it for emotional pain.
Yeah.
And you guys, like you pointed it out. I don't know exactly how it was, but through the challenge, you pointed out using anything. And if you're using it to avoid that uncomfortableness, that thing that hurts, it's a coping mechanism.
Well, he was coming home every night and like just taking one every night, just like, it was a habit, you know?
And so,
it's such a slippery slope, right? It's like it starts off so innocent, and then amazing. We're so addictive, right?
Yeah.
Like we can just get so addicted.
Yeah.
So it's so great to build that awareness of, okay, I think like I'm starting to go down a path here.
Yeah. I think what was coming to mind when you were saying that is I remember we mentioned it, especially too with around, I think we talked about it in Sacred Sexuality. And I said, a lot of times we'll use sex with our partner as a coping mask also.
Yeah.
And I think that's might've been what triggered it. I feel like I've heard you talk about that one, what really like blew you away when we were saying, be careful. Don't use your sex and your partnership as a giant mask of avoiding something, because that's a really common one too. Is same thing. We can even become addicted to healthy concepts like your sex with your partner. Like at first glance, you're like, wow, that's so beautiful. But then it's like, well, do you use it to get out of like an emotional problem? Do you get it to make yourself feel better? Do you like use it as a stress reliever? So yeah, it could be anything, right? It could be marijuana. It could be alcohol. It could be sex with your partner. Like it is interesting to start to just take that self-reflection time to say, what am I using this to either mask something or to get away from something?
Whenever we're grasping outside of ourselves for comfort.
Yeah.
To feel neutral again. And it's like we become reliant on something outside of ourselves to feel good. And that becomes really dangerous.
Yeah. What do you feel about is there a place? Do you guys see a place? And I'm not asking for judgment. I'm just curious. Is there a place for plant medicine, psychedelics, even wine?
Yeah, absolutely.
What does that look like in your opinion?
So I would say kind of what we've already, with say with the alcohol, the wine example. I think with all of them, the main thing is first and foremost, addressing the attachment, making sure that there's no charge, right? So we already talked about that.
Yeah.
I think the second thing too is if you are going to do it, whatever that particular thing is, do it as consciously as possible. Some of my greatest life epiphanies have come after a couple beers. So who am I to say, wow, that helped me have a breakthrough? Or I used to smoke marijuana a lot, and actually it was a huge, massive facilitator for some breakthroughs. Now, the difference though was, let's say when I first started smoking, in college, and I was using it just to cope and goof off and have a good time, versus, 5 years later when I'm literally praying over it, being like, okay, thank you for the epiphanies and mind, expansion you're going to give me. And then using it very medicinal shaman, almost.
Yeah. So when you're using something medicinally, it's not recreational on a daily basis. And in Buddhism, they say that alcohol is the pathway to false enlightenment, because the experience Matt's saying, you get a preview breakthroughs when you use things, right? So marijuana, ayahuasca, whatever the thing is. But it becomes false enlightenment when you rely upon it for that state.
Access the state.
So the state of consciousness that you're accessing is true freedom, right? Or love. And you're like, I feel good.
So good.
Right.
And you have to understand that you're previewing it, and it is going to drop you back to your baseline energy as soon as you're not using it, because you're just getting a preview. So it can be very helpful because you can't go somewhere that you don't know exists. So it's really nice to have like a plant medicine experience and to be like, it open you up to the possibility of a higher frequency.
Yeah. Because now you know what that felt like.
Now you have to.
That felt really loving and good. And it's like, cool. Well, that could be your normal baseline. It's sober.
But now you have to figure out, how do you access that when you're not reliant on the plant medicine or the substance? You have to now learn how to get back to that place and take a hero's journey inside of yourself and know where you're going. But you have to do it alone, and you have to do it on your own. And you can't be reliant, because otherwise it's the Buddha's false enlightenment, where you're taking a pill to access a state. And if you don't have the pill, you don't have the state. So you're not actually in that state.
And that's why, like in my journey, for example, Ash and I, especially, this was partly why I gave up marijuana and drinking on a normal basis, but especially marijuana on a normal basis, because I would have these epiphanies. Like something that what made me stop is she was like, Matt, I have heard this 40 times. Like, you've had this same
I literally
epiphany.
started recording him talk, because he would talk so beautifully.
And they were big.
Like,
they were
so
beautiful.
poetic. And
I'm
like,
sure.
these, like great grand epiphanies of like his own understanding of himself. Like, wow, I've just realized
I'd have like a whole
this.
breakthrough. Wow, my mom did this, and that's why. And I am
really breaking
beautiful.
free from this, and I am this new person. And I'm like, beautiful. And then the next day it would be like right back to the same behavior, and like his mindset would be negative again. And I'd be like, you were just so positive. Now you're negative again. It's not actually changing. I literally got to the point where I was like, I prefer him on drugs. Like I actually have a beer, go smoke, like whatever, because I prefer you this way. But that's not, sustainable. So
the irony was like we would always. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like it's about, and that's what's resonated with me in the past, is like you go and you have this experience, and now it's time to integrate it into everyday life.
Yes.
And then maybe, way down the road, once that's been integrated, okay, you want to have another experience or another breakthrough.
Sure.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. So
it's a great way to open the door to have, like, let's say someone has extreme PTSD, like the vets and stuff, right? They're so stuck in the patterning of trauma. What is going to break them out of that? It's near impossible. So you give the plant medicine, and they have a breakthrough forcefully through the plant medicine. It breaks them through to a different frequency. They're like, wow, I see. And it's like, great. Now you got to come off of that and do the work, get there, take the hero's journey, and get there on your own. And now now you know how to do it. You know it exists.
Yes. So you're using the medicine consciously, knowing that, yes, you're probably going to preview something really beautiful. However, if you don't integrate it, it won't mean anything. And the other thing is, the highest conscious use of that is to say, okay, I did taste something real, that happiness or that peace or that stress relief or that whatever, that actually was my true nature. Now I got to figure out how to make that just normal. Mm-hmm. And I have to remove whatever, because as soon as we sober up, basically what happens is the ego's defenses and attachments come back. That's what's happening. And so the reason why we have a drop in our theme of consciousness is because the ego's layers all come back. Whereas the substance subdues our ego long enough so we can get over it and go preview something else. But then that's the issue, right? Is then as soon as the medicine wears off, you're right back in your ego construct. So that's why.
So hopefully you can use it with self-reflection to say, what is my ego's construct?
Yes.
So, cause you're outside of it.
Now you're getting contrast.
So that's why people have these amazing ayahuasca experiences, because they see what's been blocking them all along. And then it's easier to let it go because you're outside of it. So if you can use it for self-reflection, then I think that's the best way to use it.
Yeah.
Holy cow. So to connect the dots backwards for you guys, I'm going to tell you that, like, it just came to me. I would not be sitting here talking to you guys if it weren't for plant medicine, because just whenever it was in October, I had in a ceremonial approach used psilocybin and MDMA and had an experience that showed me my partner and showed me divinity with her.
Wow.
And I was like, holy cow, I've been shutting all of this off because I was like, I had determined I'm an avowed atheist. I'm not doing this thing. And it totally we
had conversations about labels, and I'm like, about him just taking on another label and saying that I'm an atheist and that's almost a religion in itself. If you're not open-minded, we've done all this work, and he just was not hearing me. And I was kind of
slowly going down this path of, okay, maybe there's something, but that happened. And what came to me was the trauma that she had been telling me about needing to feel supported, needing to feel like rooted really well. And she needed it from me as well. And I just wasn't hearing it in a way that resonated. But that allowed me to hear it. So when she came to me in the end of January and said, the yoga couple's doing this Namaste Together challenge, would you do it with me? I was like, I'm going to do it to support you.
Wow.
Like that's why I did it.
That was progress right there. I'm going to do it for you.
I'm going to do it for you. Not my jam, but let's do it. And I've promised her, like, if we're going to do something, it's either a hell yes or a no. And so if it's a hell yes, we're giving it everything we've got.
Yeah, because the last thing I wanted him to do is to say he was going to do it, but not actually do it,
Right.
So.
And because of that breakthrough, even though I came back from that weekend and I was like, man, I'm going to be the best fucking husband. I'm going to nail it this time. I'm going to be great. She'll see the last 10, because we've been married for 10 years in July. I'm going to be the husband she sees that I can be. But then I would still be human, and I would still fall back into those lower themes of consciousness. And I would get so frustrated and wonder why. God, I saw it. I saw what I can be. I saw what I could do. Why am I falling in this? And then I would fall back into the shame and the judgment and the guilt and all that.
But that challenge was exactly what he needed in that moment, because he had so many breakthroughs every day. And so did I, by the way. But it was seriously so powerful, just the way that you guys laid out the whole challenge and just went through. It was just beautiful. It was so transformational.
Yeah, I know we've told you thank you so much, but it really was.
we're just thank you. I love hearing this, and I had no idea that you were so fresh to everything, because you were so receptive in the challenge. So that's so interesting to hear.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I have a lot of history with it, and I have a lot of history with spirituality growing up and being a very devout member of the Mormon Church. And so
he prayed for the first time, you guys, after the Namaste challenge, prayed with our family.
Holy moly.
Epic.
Yeah,
that is the coolest thing to hear.
Yeah. In fact, we now have started a new ritual of praying before our food in a totally different way. So much more sincere and so much more our kids were like, we're going to pray. And we're like, yeah, I think we're going to do this. And they're like, all right.
Well, and it's more we're not because our kids all do yoga with us. So they know that sense of spirituality, but praying before dinner, anything that looked like religion, Brad just wasn't about it, So it's been good.
As a fun fact on praying on your food is that in consciousness research, they've seen that the energy of the food does increase when we pray over food.
Molecules change.
The molecules.
You've seen it, Dr.
I've seen it.
Yeah. The health of the food is more.
I keep blessed water in the fridge. And we did do the whole, we went around the table saying what we were grateful for, and we did do that. But this was an actual prayer, asking the universe,
Love it.
Asking and thanking and getting into gratitude. It's been an amazing thing. But I just had those dots connected. Wow, it was that thing that allowed, because what it did, you said it, Ash, it allows you to see what's possible. It opens the door. Mm-hmm. And that was a beautiful thing. I've got so many questions. I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, go for it.
Okay. You're good. So I'm going to change subjects just a little bit, if that's okay, but still on themes of consciousness, because as challenges come up for me, I'm like, man, I wonder what my gurus would say about this. So, I hope that doesn't embarrass you, but I want to talk about forgiveness. Because I've noticed as I'm going down this, doing the inner work, I'm now hyper aware of when I'm in judgment of somebody else. And so when you've been wronged, this is my question that I wrote, when you've been wronged or hurt and you're ready to move past it, but that person is a part, like they're a part of your life, like a family member, a sibling, somebody that you just cannot, you can't avoid. And they're not doing any work. They're in fact, maybe they're like digging into their position, right? So you can't ignore them. I struggle with having feelings of judgment, anger, and other negative emotions, even at the mention of that person. And it's something I've been dealing with lately. I'm ready to let it go. I'm ready to move past it. And I'm curious, and this is not anything new. I mean, especially with family trauma, right? Family trauma is I just see it all the time. And it's really weird for me to be in the middle of it. Help walk me.
Yeah, we have a lot of.
We have
a lot of experience.
Yeah, I have some. First, we have a lot of experience with this.
Okay, great.
We've had a lot of like business partnerships and all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah,
and it's difficult, right? Because
we've been violated a lot. Yeah. We'll just put it that way.
We've lived in basically a commune, like a community. So we get when things get really intertwined intimately, how painful it can be to have somebody, feel like they wronged you and you are in this intimate community. So what now? And I'm curious to see what you say, but the two things that are coming up for me is that number one, if you read the Inner Work book, you'll see that forgiveness and like true, genuine forgiveness is many, many steps away from feeling violated.
Yeah, it's the theme of acceptance.
So you can think about people who go through an addiction journey and they have to go through like the 12 steps and things like this. It is exactly like that. There is many steps
to get to actual forgiveness.
Yeah. And so the themes of consciousness are kind of like this ladder of processing and being in specific emotions, such as judgment, such as grief and sadness, such as anger, and that it's actually okay for you to go through that journey and be in that emotion. And the rejection of that emotion is actually what keeps you stuck. Yeah. This belief that you're not allowed to be angry, this belief that you're not allowed to judge, this belief that you're not allowed to be sad because it's not spiritual enough and it's not forgiving, It's like when you allow yourself to have that emotion come up and you don't reject or push it away, it will have its natural timing. You accepting yourself in that emotion will allow you to move on from it. So there is a process for forgiveness that isn't just somebody wronged me, now I need to jump to forgiveness.
Yeah, this is actually one of our biggest messages of our whole work with teaching the inner work to the world is that the healing journey is relative. And we drill this, you guys have probably heard it in the teacher training so many times now. The reason is because it's, so sorry, we've been still recovering from being sick from traveling. So there's so many steps in that journey of healing. And we're so used to hearing, like, especially in religions, just move to forgiveness, right. Just forgive and let live and like move. Well, and as far as themes of consciousness, you look at the actual map of that and you're like, so basically you're saying, go from the very bottom to like the very top, jump. Just no problem. You just want me to do that. And so what we are so passionate about sharing with the world with this work is that it's okay to be where you are. We can maybe look at this a little bit more here in a second, but like, it's okay for you to be in that judgment. What if that's good for you? What if that's actually healthy? And we'll talk about some cases where that's important. So it's important to allow ourselves to move through the themes because they all have a time and a place. They all are important in the overall healing journey. The journey is not just this simple, like you're a normal human and then you're enlightened, or you've been wronged and now you forgive. Like There's actually like 10 other steps in between that no one talks about. And so that's why we're trying to share that message.
Practical that you can do is self-evaluate the emotion you're feeling and give yourself a safe container to express it. So being judgmental at the person is probably not healthy. And when we think about judgment, we're like, you want to tell somebody off and like blame them and project. Like that's not healthy. That's not going to go anywhere. But what you can do is you can journal and you can write out the things that you would like to say. And you could have a way of getting it out of your body. Yep. Like we are physical beings and these emotions are stored in our body unless we give it an exit. So it's really important to purge. Like, let's say you were sick. You have to get the virus out of you. You have to get the bacteria out of you. There has to be a purge. These negative emotions also need an exit. So how are you giving yourself a safe container for the toxicity, this toxic emotion that you're dealing with every day? How is it going to get out of you? So that could be like Matt had me do primal yelling. Yesterday, I did a primal warrior scream into pillow. And, and I had this whole process with like yelling and getting that anger out of me, journaling. And I remember a very specific time that I was very hurt by Matt. And I had that awareness of it's not going to be healthy to call him all of these names and say this to him. And I did. I wrote out all the stuff I wanted to tell him off and blah, blah, blah. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, like, I don't actually think that anymore. Like, I just needed to validate myself. And then I was able to talk to him in a more compassionate way. So understand that it's okay to have a negative emotion, but you need to have a safe, self-contained way of expressing it and giving it an outlet. And once you do that, you'll find you naturally move on to the next step, the next, from judgment, you're going to go into like emptiness and then sadness, like you're going to feel a void now after you've expressed your judgment of just feeling kind of hopeless. Like, okay, now what?
Like they're not going to change.
They're not going to change. And then once you sit with that, then all of a sudden you feel sad and now you're in grief and now you can express your grief and your exit is crying and like, let yourself actually express and go through each stage appropriately with a strategy of releasing that emotion safely.
And my question on that is, how do you know, like, because obviously I think it's important, right, that you create boundaries with this person. But what do healthy boundaries look like in this type of scenario? And is it stuffing to like, do you eventually have to talk about it with this person? Or do you just like, if it's a family member, are you like, no, this is just a toxic person. I'm not going to have a relationship with this person.
Totally depends on the level and degree of the abuse. I've had plenty of clients where like their parents are legitimate narcissists and they need to keep them the F out of it.
We always say it depends. Every situation depends. So, the answer is always it depends. There's not one way.
Like we keep saying, it's relative. Like it's always relative to the exact situation. But I'll share, I have with my own mother, I had to do this with her. This would be more of the healthy example where she's not extreme enough to where I have to cut her out altogether. But I did have to have a pretty strong, firm conversation with her one time of she's extremely judgmental. And to the point where every time I would talk to her, she just always had some bullshit to say like, oh, your beard's still long. You should cut your hair. Oh, you're still doing this. Like to the dumbest shit. And I eventually just told her, Mom, you are my biggest doubter, just so you know. You are the biggest negative person in my life. And if you were another adult, I would cut you out so quickly. And I said, so Mom, I love you and I do want you to be in my life. I know that you do this from love, but just so you know, you actually really hurt me. And it constantly slows me down. Okay, so here we go. I'm kind of telling her what happens to me. She freaks out, of course, because the person's going to get defensive.
Sure.
And, she says, I'm just a mom. I just love you. And I said, Mom, this is the important part. You have to tell them what you would like them to do. I said, don't pull the mom card on me. Because truly unconditionally loving mom would actually say this. She would say, no matter what you do, I'll stand by you. No matter how many people make fun of you, I'll take the arrows for you. I will be there for you. I will believe in you. I will always support you.
If you like your hair that way, then I like it too. If you like
your hair that way, I like your hair that way. If you want to have a beard, I want you to have a beard. Like whatever the thing is. And then she was, that kind of got her thinking. She was pissed off for a couple of days, but having planted that seed of what a healthy relationship would look like, it gave her the opportunity to try it.
But you also said, if you're not able to do that, then I can't have a relationship with you, because this is what I need in the relationship. Yeah. So let me know how you feel about that.
Yeah. So, and I had to draw a pretty firm line of consequence of like, hey, if you can't do this, I'm going to have to distance myself from you because I can't handle it. And so one of the most important things about this whole process is you always want to own your feelings and experience. So notice I'm saying, Mom, I'm not strong enough to handle your judgments. So it's not about her. It's actually about me. I'm not strong enough. Your judgments are weakening me. Like I'm getting broken because I'm already, I remember I told her like, this career and this life is already hard enough for me. So every time you throw in judgments, it makes it 10 times harder for me because I'm already struggling. So notice though, it's all about me. So this helps take the edge off the defensiveness, because when you use that I language, it helps the other person's ego not get as triggered. So I think if we could put it into a nutshell, it's kind of like you clarify the experience that's happening and the effect it's having on you. You let them know the boundary and what you do need moving forward. And then you also let them know what the consequence could look like if they can't do that. And that would be really unfortunate, but you have no other choice, because if they're going to continue to harm you, you do have to distance yourself. So that's why I was saying, like with clients that have legitimate narcissistic parents, I've had to tell clients, I'm like, you should not be talking to them ever until there's a drastic change. Because, with the parents that are stealing their kids' money and doing weird stuff or emotionally abusing them, like parents are pretty bizarre out there. There's some pretty abusive stuff going on. So it just totally depends on the level and degree. And then I think from there, once that's been established, let's say, as far as your own journey, you do have to go through the themes. So you're usually going to start with shame, because it gives an overarching feeling of something's wrong with you, or you've been degraded, or you've been hurt. From there, you have to go through judgment of, I am actually pure, innocent, and unconditionally loved. This person projected their trauma onto me, and it's actually theirs. So the healthy form of guilt and judgment is to give back the trauma and say, this isn't even mine.
They're behaving that way because that's a reflection of their life and their trauma. And I don't need to make this about
it's
me.
Not personal.
I see this is all about them. And that's that healthy form of what we call judgment. It's like they are, they are judgmental, or, whatever the thing is.
Well,
whatever the trauma was.
What if it's like somebody who lies really easily?
Yeah. So they lie because that comes from their life,
that's their own shame,
their coping mechanisms, their life history. They developed that habit for some reason. And I am separate from that. That is theirs. And it's like, that's the judgment part of like giving it back, and whatever repercussions have happened to you because of that lying that you've been intertangled with, you're just giving it all back. Like, this happened because of their lying, and that's their shit.
Like, for example, let's walk through that. So the ego takes that personally and says, I'm worthy of being lied to. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the reason why we get traumatized is because our ego naturally takes trauma personally. So let's say with this one, the ego is saying, wow, I must be a real piece of shit because people are allowed to lie to me.
Also,
and then, let me finish this thought. And then like with the judgment with my mom, my ego says, wow, I must really be wrong and have all these problems, and I must be worthy of all these judgments. Okay, now go ahead.
Sometimes with the lying, it could be even more than that, because what you're really identifying is manipulation. And so you identify with, when you're being manipulated, it's a gaslighting experience that you shouldn't hold somebody accountable because you would be a bad person or judgmental for not allowing this behavior, because that manipulation comes with like, there needs to be you need to allow this behavior basically. Like when somebody is lying, that is manipulation. Mm-hmm. So the guilt and judgment is, I shouldn't cut them out because they manipulated me. I shouldn't have a boundary because they manipulated. The guilt is like, guilt and judgment are one thing. If you don't judge them basically, and you don't call out the manipulation, you then are on the flip side going to feel guilty. You're going to feel like I shouldn't hold them accountable. I shouldn't judge them. So then you take on the guilt and you feel guilty for having a boundary. So guilt and judgment, if you don't judge, which is just identify the abuse. That's all judgment is just identify the abuse. If you don't go through that step, you will hold on to the guilt because you will forever feel guilty for not holding them account. Like you're not allowed to do that. So you have to identify the abuse. That is judgment in order to relieve yourself of
carrying it yourself.
Shame, the theme before it, and the guilt you're going to carry for forever feeling like I'm not allowed to hold them accountable. You have to identify the abuse.
And then from there, you can keep working.
Brad's face right now is just like,
it's very, I mean, nice. This is the theme of consciousness that like you talk about all the time that we have to start at, right? So this theme of judgment and then, or shame and then judgment and guilt. And it's this weird, there's this weird cyclical thing that happens until you break that chain. Like for me, candidly, it was lying myself. Like I was caught up in so many lies that it was crazy. But when I went through a divorce over 12 years ago, like I made these commitments to myself, right? That I was going to be honest. I was going to tell the truth. And, but I still carried so much shame for the lies that I had told. And then I found myself lying again, even though I had like made these commitments, these promises, these public declarations, everything. And then I noticed lying happening to me, like people lying to me, and me feeling like I have to be okay with it because I've lied so much. And
do you know what's so funny is the second part of this that I was going to say when it comes to forgiveness is going through the themes of consciousness. But secondly, to identify whatever the wrongdoing is that you feel from the other person, you need to ask, what is this bringing up for me? Why am I so triggered by this?
Right.
So obviously, like if you've had a background with feeling, lying yourself, like obviously someone lying to you is going to be like your highest trigger.
Right.
Because what that brings up for you is your shadow.
Right.
So like you are obviously are rejecting this part of yourself hardcore. Like, I do not want to be this person. So when somebody comes and mirrors it back to you, it is like so traumatizing, so painful because it's you. You're seeing yourself. You're seeing the pain that you cause.
Correct.
You're seeing how you behave. Like I just went through a very similar experience with this, like literally like yesterday. So this is really potent for me of like seeing the thing that is actually me. I'm like hurt by, but it's actually me all along. And reconciling that, you know what, getting to that place of forgiveness comes with reconciling that you were lying because that was the coping mechanism for something. You did it
to be yourself
to survive.
Right.
You learned to lie
is a survival
to technique. Survive something. You had to not be authentic in order to cope. And that just developed bigger and bigger into a bigger, stronger pattern over time. And it went into things that didn't even make sense anymore with the trauma. Right. Originally, you were just lying to your parents about A, B, and C as a kid because you knew you'd get hit. And now that's become a personality trait that, later in your marriage is coming out in bizarre ways because it never got dealt with.
Right.
And eventually you get to this point of compassion and forgiveness as you go through the themes and you're able to have grace for yourself and grace for others. But it takes that whole journey of allowing yourself to, for you feel healthy guilt of the pain you caused, feel the hopelessness of that. The next theme is like, oh my gosh, I caused all this pain. And then now you feel hopeless. Like how could I ever be redeemed from this?
Another word for that theme is overwhelm. It's overwhelming.
How do you even correct this?
Feel the impact of that.
And then you feel deep sadness and grief. And then you feel, the fear. of like, what if I can't resolve this? What if my whole life falls apart now because of this? What if I lose everything?
Comes back but
then you face that fear.
All of that is the crazy thing. Yeah. Like he went through the themes of consciousness at such an extreme level through like leaving the church and getting his redemption for all of this. Like he was excommunicated from the church. Sorry, I'm telling your story, but
you face the fear. Then you're like, okay, I'm afraid of, but what if I could face it and I could fix it? And you get into desire, and that desire drives you to make change in your life. Yeah. And then you get angry for change because you're like, F this, I'm not going to wallow anymore. And you know what? If people don't forgive me, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to just do me and fix this, and people are going to do what they want to do. And then you get angry, and then you do it, and then you feel pride because you're like, I did it. I'm not that person anymore. I'm awesome. And if you don't see it, that's see yourself out. I'm not that person anymore. And then you get courageous, and then you let go of the pride, and you have a little bit more humility, and you're like, I'm just human. We all have our shit. And then you start showing up in a really integrous way, and it's all uphill. It's all downhill from there. It's all great from there. Yeah.
You should totally share what breakthrough you had with the root chakra.
Oh my gosh, you guys. I wanted to share with you. I didn't know if I needed to share with you, but I wanted to tell you because you told me how much I was going to, or told us how much we were going to love the root chakra psychology. And I totally am digging it. And I had this amazing breakthrough this morning because I was thinking about answering the question, is it an excessive or a deficient root chakra? And this might not be appealing to everybody, but some amazing stuff that you went over. One thing I realized is I have this excessive root chakra, and I started writing in our Facebook group, and I had these memories of my family moved a lot as a child. My parents had become, they had converted to the Mormon faith when I was 3 years old, but we lived on the East Coast. And so like between Jacksonville, Florida, Atlanta, Memphis, Long Island, where it was not the cool thing to be a Mormon. In fact, it was kind of weird. And so I began at a really early age. I saw it for the first time. Monday through Saturday, I was lying about who I was to all my friends and peer groups, and because nobody else was LDS. And then on Sunday, I had to show up to church with my best Mormon persona. And I did that really well too. Like I excelled in that. And I said to Tiff, I was literally lying all the time. Yeah. I was lying to this group, and Monday through Saturday, because with my non-Mormon friends, I wasn't the nerdy Mormon. I was the cool kid who did. But by being the cool kid and breaking all the rules that Mormons had, on Sunday I had to lie about that to be the good Mormon kid. Yeah. And I was just coping. I was just this little kid through a teenager, and then developed really destructive habits that became it also became one of my great strengths, this ability to just fit in, right? I said I used to have this thing that I would brag about: throw me wherever you want. I can fit in. I'm bilingual. I can assimilate with multiple crowds. It served me well when I went to jail. But now I know how to do it while being integral. Integral by walking in integrity and truth, and still showing it. Because what it was, I used to think it was that ability to change, but what it really was, the highest truth, is that it was my ability to love. Connect. My ability to love and connect people. That's what people felt, right? It wasn't this ability to act like a stoner around stoners or be a jock around jocks. It was just that I loved everybody, because that's the highest truth. And I had that breakthrough this morning, you guys, by understanding the root chakra.
I wonder, when you're thinking about the person that you said you were so triggered by, I wonder what their background and story is with lying in their whole
really
life.
Similar.
Start to think,
really similar.
Yeah. One of the biggest things is right there. It demonstrates that our greatest wounds become our greatest gifts.
Absolutely.
So what you'll see, it actually reminds me of a process you're going to do in the teacher training, actually around, I don't know, month 6 or something. And it's funeral for your old self. And there's a part of the process where you get to acknowledge that through all of your traumas came really beautiful personality traits. And what you just described is through your trauma of the shame of not being able to be yourself, it did overcompensate into a beautiful personality trait of being able to connect with anybody. So that part you get to keep.
Right.
So that's the coolest part of our healing journey is your wounds do become your greatest gifts, because when you've been shamed or judged just for being yourself, the gift that creates, because I resonate with the exact same story, moving a lot, raised Mormon, it's like your story is the exact same, that the energy is the same for me. And I always say, well, yeah, but I'm really grateful that I went through that a level of shame and judgment, because it also makes me now love everybody.
Right.
So you nailed it verbatim. Like that's exactly the concept is it was originally a wound, but once you integrate it, it actually becomes your greatest gift, because now you're really good at making people feel loved. That's the beautiful part. You get to keep that forever.
Yeah. And connecting that, because we can get so, I can get so connected to the trauma, and I've seen this in others as well. We get so connected to the trauma, to the hurt, that we forget that beautiful gift, right? Or maybe we just haven't seen it yet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the gem of it all. There's
always
the silver lining in finding that. Yeah.
Okay, Tiff, that was, I don't know how we got, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much walking me through that.
So glad you shared that.
Yeah. Tiff, do you have something, or do you want me to go to the next? We made a bunch of notes. I'll just go to the next one, because we had some.
Mine are kind of saved for the last, and they're kind of.
Okay, let me open this real quick. Okay, this is something Tiff and I. So one of the concepts that you taught us and that we felt for a long time, but you helped cement, is this idea that the path of enlightenment with another soul that has chosen the same, like they've committed to the same journey, right? It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be hard. And one of the things we are for each other is, like, we are each other's number one trigger, right? And mirror. Help walk me through. So when Tiff tells me, wow, and I'm explaining something to her, I am feeling so triggered right now. And then her expressing that to me, then I'm triggered. Because normally what I go into then is I recognize now, Matt, you shared something recently that reminded me, okay, like your trigger is sending me deep into shame and guilt and judgment. Yeah. And I can see that. And I want to honor the trigger.
More than anything else is, like, I'm feeling triggered. I'm not in a space to have this conversation right now. Like, I need to breathe. And then he's like, he wants to have this conversation right now because he's triggered. And why are you're being triggered and now it's triggering me? And he's, right?
Right. And this was I love how you guys walk through this experience and the things you taught us, but share with me, like, how that all unfolds for couples that are dealing, because any couple, wherever they're at on their phase, their journey, they're going to trigger each other. Right? Am I right about that?
Yeah. No, it's actually by design. So your subconscious, all of our subconscious, what we do is when we are attracted to a partner, your shadows are attracted too. Mm-hmm. So we're attracted to each other's highest versions of us. That's that's the fun part we all fall in love with. But on the flip side of that, our shadows love each other too. And they're like, oh, I have,
or you say they actually despise each other. So you have, like, the highest selves loves each other.
They love to screw each other up is what I'm getting at. They're like two demons. Yes. They're like, cool, we're going to fuck these people up. It's going to be
your
great.
Your shadows, like, hate each other, and your higher selves love each other.
Yeah, so it's like the angels of us are like, yay, we're going to heal together. And then the demons are like, we're going to ruin these people. Yes. So that's
I'm seeing the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. Like,
yes,
angel celebrating.
It's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real. And if we looked at it from a spiritual or from a psychological perspective, we would just say your subconscious has a shadow and they are attracted to each other too. And so what we mean by this is, let's say someone has a pattern of, shutting down and getting, feeling attacked and shamed, and it goes into a withdrawal. Well, they tend to attract a partner who's really aggressive, and then the partner is aggressive and is the aggressor. So they find each other because they love to trigger each other. And so,
or if you have an abandonment wound, you're going to probably attract someone who loves to leave,
really independent,
and they're like, I'm good, I don't need you, bye. And then the person's like, I feel so abandoned by that.
Yes. So we could go over all the different shadow matches, but you just want to start to
they're
think
opposite counterparts,
they're
right?
They trigger each other on purpose. And so when I go into my shadow, I'm triggering her shadow. When she goes into her shadow, it's triggering my shadow. So that's actually entirely normal. It's just part of being human, because that's part of the attraction process. It comes with both. So the beauty is,
so expect it.
Yeah. The beauty is, once you expect that, you actually realize. Now here's the cool part though, is that also is why you're each other's greatest healers, is because in order to get the healing, you had to get the trigger. So the relationship is literally, it has to have that. Otherwise the person's just a random person. That's what makes them such an important part of your life, is because of that component.
This awareness in and of itself is helpful and healing to couples, because the world tells us that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, it should be comfortable.
And because we think that shouldn't be happening, that drives us apart. It makes us question if we're in the right relationship. It makes us wonder if we should be with somebody else, because we think this process shouldn't be happening. So as long as you think this shouldn't be happening, every time it does, which is inevitable, you're setting yourself up for failure, because you think this shouldn't be happening. So just the change in perspective of this is exactly what's supposed to be happening, this is right on time, allows the space for the healing to unfold. There's never going to be healing if you guys think this shouldn't be happening, because every time it does, you're tallying it as another episode and reason why this relationship is going to fail. Oh, we did it again. Oh, we did it again. We must not be meant to be together. We've gotten in this fight, multiple times. So this is probably a sign that this is never going to work out, versus, of course, this is happening. It's right on schedule. We just had just so you guys know, for every good amount of amazing times, just expect you're going to have equally amount challenging. Yep. This is how life works. You're not always going to be on top of the mountain. It doesn't work like that. So we just had an amazing time in India. Okay, just be aware what goes up comes down. Okay. We get home, super challenging. If we don't expect that, we're shocked. Why is this happening? Because what goes up comes down. It's okay. So we need to get more comfortable being in discomfort and just letting things unfold without thinking they shouldn't be happening. And when we do that, we can get curious and say, what's the healing trying to come out of this? What is this trying to break us open to? A new level of compassion. We just have a breakthrough of, we need to have a new level of tolerance for each other. So now we had a great high in India. We came home, crashed. What goes up comes down. And by sitting through that and saying, this doesn't need to break us apart, what's actually this inviting us? It's inviting us to have a new level of tolerance. So a great gem comes out of it. So you have the great epiphanies of the great times, and then you have the great epiphanies of the low times. And both of them have learning and both of them have gems, but you got to stop thinking it shouldn't be happening.
What has come up for me so many times during this conversation is, I don't know if you know Drew McManus with Satsang. He's a singer.
Oh yeah. We love that band. Yeah.
Yeah, they're phenomenal.
So the song, The Work Is Never Done. Like it's just is so true. Like it feels like you break through to this level, but then once you master that level, there's more work, and then you get to the next level. And I think it's when we have this expectation that there's a destination, or that the work is going to be done, and it's just going to be all bliss all the time, is when we feel the biggest disappointment. Well,
and it seems to coincide, and you just said it, like as we've been as I've been going through yoga teacher training, and I've never really, like I said, I've never really had a yoga practice. I've had a stretching practice, not even a practice. Like I would do it when I wasn't lifting on days that I wasn't moving heavy weight. And as I've, like one of the things you talked about, Ash, in the training is like, you have to have your own training. You have to have your own practice. Like you have to. And so I'm like, okay, if it's a hell yes, I'm all in. And so I have to have a practice. So as I've been developing my own practice and waking up and doing it first thing, more shit has been coming up.
He's been having all of these emotions just like come out of him and like has these outbursts, and I'm like showing it to him, and he's like doing great at like doing the work, but like he's gotten more angry. He's had like all this stuff come up, and I was explaining to him, yeah, that like you're saying you're ready to do the work, like you're
this
doing
is
the
what
work.
it looks like.
It's probably like a lifetime of repressed emotion, to be honest. So
for sure.
It's good. It's coming to
like
the surface.
50 years of like, anytime I would get angry, I'd just go throw heavy shit around, or I'd like go beat on something or do something and think, okay, I'm not angry anymore. Great. And it was
me
just
and Matt always, we always say it's compost. So like, if you think we have compost here in Hawaii, so like whenever you're cooking and doing your food, you got to take all the scraps and put it in this bucket and then go throw it, out. And nobody wants to go throw the bucket out because it's a pain in the ass. You got to go out in the middle of the rain and go throw out the compost. So that can get piled up. And you can think about like the compost in your body and your emotional healing and how long you haven't taken it out. And if you don't take it out, it starts to get like maggots, and it like grows things, and it starts to smell really bad.
And then you don't want to take it out even more because you're like, damn it, the longer we wait,
I'm just not going to pick this up or touch it. And it just accumulates.
So the irony is, the longer you wait, the grosser it keeps getting.
Yeah. So you start your practice, and now you've got this giant, whatever, how many years you say, compost bucket that you have to go deal with. And it's more stinky than ever, more maggots than ever. It's got mold growing, and it's so full and gross, and it's getting all over you when you go dump it out. And that's the consequence of not taking it out on a regular basis.
Well, and there seems to be something, because up until this point, it's not like I was walking around completely like blissfully unaware of my own, my own weaknesses. Right. But it was when I connected it all to really a higher purpose, a higher, and for me, it's been divinity, like this attachment to a higher power that I still don't really understand, and I'm like not hung up on it anymore. That I don't like logically understand it all, because trying to piece it all together, I'm like, I don't know, I get lost quickly. But the tying it to faith, there's a critical component to that, right?
And as like one of the benefits of us being a second marriage was like we knew all the shit that we did wrong from our first marriages. So we came to this relationship with a set of rules, like
commitments.
If there's shit, we didn't call them commitments.
We didn't call them commitments till the challenge. Yeah.
Like, we're going to deal with our shit. If we're not happy, like I'm not going to be in another marriage for 8-10 years that I'm not happy in. So if there's something that you're doing that's bugging me, you're going to know about it. And it was really funny because he was kind of the opposite. Like in his marriage, they played the role that everything was perfect, but they had all of this shit that they just never looked at, never talked about, So when I came to him and was like, in the beginning of our relationship, like, I need to talk to you about this thing, his reaction every time was like, are you breaking up with me? Is this you breaking up with me? And I started, like, I had to say, stop saying that. No, I'm not breaking up with you, but we have to talk about these things. We have to work it out. And so I felt like we had a good foundation for a relationship, and truth became, for him, it became a value for him. That was like kind of a non-negotiable, even though, there's hindsight to everything. But for the most part, we were really set on dealing in truth. And I think it got us to a certain level in our relationship where we were really good. But again, there's still more work to do, right?
The work never ends.
You think of it too, like on a terms of when you really contemplate, this is what I've been pondering for a while too, because it can be unsettling at first, because I think when people first start the healing or spiritual journey, the original craving or reason is the ego wants to find a place where it's no longer suffering, where we're just always in comfort. I think that's usually the highest motivator we usually all start, is because we want to be more comfortable. Yeah. So the thing though you learn is you eventually realize, the way this is going to work is I actually I'm always going to be facing discomfort. There is no escaping discomfort. In fact, all I'm going to actually get really good at is being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And that the actual work is that. And I think even for me, like I've been pondering that, because when Ash and I have talked about it, especially as an addict, what is the whole addiction process? To seek comfort. And, I'm comfort seeking. So for me, especially, I was talking to her about it, and I just said, I'm just tripping out because I think I'm technically craving some like Eden, like, place of pure pleasure and comfort. And then we started talking about it, and we realized that that's actually not even supported by the universe or nature, because if you are in a place of extreme comfort and no more discomfort, that would also mean we're in stagnation. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a tricky,
like the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, like the Garden of Eden was actually complete stagnation because they're not progressing. There's zero choice. There's no choice. Everything's the same. Everything's comfortable. There is no right or wrong yet. There's no hurt. There's no discomfort.
And I love this analogy too. We've been tripping on this, is that the masculine energy, like Adam, was like content with that. He was like,
dude, I don't want to leave.
Okay, this is good. Let's just do this for eternity. Yeah. And
he's
then,
like, Father said not to do this. I don't want to do this.
Then Eve is like the feminine, and she's like, let's shake it up and try something different and cause a bunch of chaos and problems and like, but then we'll be on an adventure and we'll be living and we'll have consequences. And she's the one doing that. And guy's like, we're good. Yeah.
That's so funny.
It's kind of funny.
She's always pushing Adam out of purgatory. It's like, okay, we're done being stagnant here. Once there's stagnation, it's like, we're done with that stagnation. Now let's eat another apple.
There's
like,
no progress.
Let's move on.
So there's this irony that
let's do something different.
We all think that we want pure comfort and no more discomfort. But when you actually sit with it, you realize that we actually don't. We only want it temporarily, but you do get bored, because what happens is when we're not making progress, I love, like Tony Robbins I've always stuck with this line where he said, happiness for humans, as humans, happiness is a sensation of progress. It's not about a destination. It's just that we know we're making progress. That's what makes us fulfilled as humans. So when we extrapolate that to a spiritual context, that means that for all eternity,
we're going to have challenges.
But the progression of the challenges will just be different. Like maybe I'm not dealing with like poverty challenges or drug addiction challenges anymore, but maybe now my challenges are like greater levels of compassion, greater levels of wisdom, discomfort of my health, and keeping my health, like, you know what I'm saying? Like the challenges keep evolving.
That's what I wanted to say is the good news about it with the inner work and stuff is like, yes, you're going to always have discomfort, but if you're doing the inner work, ideally your bottom keeps up leveling. So your baseline bottom maybe starts in shame, and really painful, really heavy shit,
trauma.
As you heal, maybe your baseline now is just anger, and it's like a different level of discomfort, but it's not as low as the lows you've been in, because as you progress, it's like, I don't know how to explain this for listeners, but like, what is that line? Like the line that goes up on the stocks, like the new bottom was the old high. Mm-hmm. Right. Like it keeps progressing. So as you go through the themes of consciousness and as you progress through your life, your peaks become your new bottoms, and then you go higher. And that's nice. That's the good news.
That's a beautiful analogy, actually.
Yeah. I had another yoga teacher explain to me that stuck with me, like ever since. She described, like, we have these sandbags that are tied to our feet, and at the same time we have these balloons that are like raising our consciousness, and the sandbags drag us down, but the more we can cut them off, then the balloons take us higher, and the more, like,
so true.
Yeah. And that you're constantly doing this like a zigzag, but it's an upward trajectory. So
love that.
Well, I love the work you guys have done for couples and the guidance, and like that's something that's so special for Tiff and I, and a message we want to make sure it gets out a lot, because we really believe in like the sanctity and the beautiful couple pairing that can happen when two souls decide to get through this life together, get through this journey of enlightenment together, like really committed. And that thing that you say just sticks with me so much. Like, it's not that it's going to be this place of bliss all the time. In fact, if you found the right person, it's a guarantee that it won't be.
Yeah.
But that is the beauty of it. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with that.
Yeah, it's so amazing.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions that I wanted to end with, and they're kind of a little, I guess, deeper thought, but I wanted to ask you guys to explain what enlightenment is for someone who may not be so, have that word said to them for a whole lot, right? I'm sure at this point, a lot of people have heard the word enlightenment. But what does that mean to you?
I can go first. Yeah, maybe we'll each share our own interpretation. So for me, enlightenment is the consistent knowing and connection to divinity. It's no matter where you are, what you're going through, what's coming up, you don't ever doubt anymore that you're in the perfect place at the perfect time and that God is with you, or whatever that word is for you. It's understanding and knowing that you're in eternity now. Like eternity is existing right now. You're already in it, and you're exactly where you're supposed to be. So when that doubt gets removed, enlightenment is your natural state, because the only reason why you're not knowing that is coming from the doubt, from the lower themes of consciousness. So once you remove anything that's blocking you from seeing that, you're in a state of contentment, peace, and knowing of connection. So I think that we experience enlightenment, all of us, in like glimpses. I think most humans have experienced enlightenment at some point in their journey, whether it was when they were a child and they just had like that moment of like existential like feeling of presence. And they're like, there's some memories that people have of that feeling, right. Or whether you're an adult and you have an understanding of what you're experiencing. Because sometimes we have that experience of enlightenment. We don't really know what to call it, right? Like you just said, like some people think of that word, they don't even know what it is, but you've probably had a moment of deep presence in your life where you kind of look around and you're like in awe, like, wow, I'm alive right now, existing in creation. And this moment is perfect and beautiful and like magical. It's actually magic. That awareness of yourself existing within creation and it being perfect is enlightenment. And I think we have glimpses of it. And so the work that you do with yoga and inner work is to help you be able to access that on command rather than it being spontaneous and like, you're just like, oh, I don't know why that happened, but I just like taking plant medicine and having it. When you do the work and you become self-disciplined through yoga, you can decide to go into that state. And you can also elongate it and perhaps even stay there permanently, which would be Jivamukti, which is where you're still in your human form and you're totally aware of that truth.
While fully participating
and playing in life, but never forgetting that moment of awe.
And that's gratitude. That's kind of the goal, right? And it's one of the things that I've loved about your guys' explanation of the tantric path is and listening to the Swami and those lessons, that it is like, that is the beauty, is that you get to experience that while being here.
Yeah.
That's
exactly. I think the only things I would add on my definition is, I think the most practical and palpable way to think of enlightenment is if you think of times in your life where you're just utterly grateful, where you're just in a state of awe and wonderment, and you're just like, everything feels right and everything feels just incredible. Like the sun is shining on you. You just think of like some of the highest moments of your life where you feel like on top of the world. That's what I would say is what Ash is describing as these glimpses. Imagine being able to feel that state of bliss, like as your base.
Even in challenging moments.
Yeah, like at all times. So enlightenment is, for me, it's living in that constant awareness of just how radically awe-inspiring every single moment is. And that technically all of this is freaking magical.
Yeah.
Like profoundly magical. Like this moment right now is is insane. We're like four conscious humans who all have a consciousness and awareness. We're all aware of each other. We're all existing in our locations, which are bizarre enough too. We could just trip out on the trees and the buildings and you know how many like variables and how much detail goes into this moment. And then there's like technology involved. There's people listening right now. Like this moment is just, it's insane magic. Mm-hmm. And then when you add the fact that you can see how incredibly loving it is, because I think another component I would add to the definition is it's the most profound love you could ever imagine. So I feel like enlightenment for me is also to add to that. Not only do you feel profound gratitude, not only do you feel profound awe, but you also feel the epitome of what it means to be loved. Like just utterly and completely and entirely loved in all times and all places. And everything feels perfect. Like everything is perfect. And I think that we can access that if we want to. It's just a question of the enlightenment path is all about letting go of what stops us from accepting that. Because it's technically, you know, like all genuine teachers will tell you, like we're all already enlightened. It's already there. Mm-hmm. It's a state of consciousness that's already innate. It's just that our ego is hiding it from us with all of our stories and our you know, themes of consciousness that block it. But we all are capable of it. And like Ash was saying, we've all tasted of it from time to time, which shows that it is our destiny. It's almost like if we're talking about it right now and you're hearing about it right now, it means it's your destiny, or else you wouldn't even be thinking or hearing it. It wouldn't even be in your awareness.
Right.
That's so beautiful.
Which brings me to another question that I have for you guys. It's so funny. It was actually the Tantra philosophy that made me think that I have to ask you guys this question. One of the questions I was going to ask is, do you believe that we're like in a time of enlightenment? But I know the answer to that one. So I kind of feel like that's a moot point. So it makes me a little nervous to ask you guys this question, which is why I know I need to ask it. I'm so curious now. And I want to just like preface it with, it's not coming from a place of fear at all. But and it's just kind of funny. Like the Vedas and a lot of other ancient texts talk about like a big event happening to like encourage awakening during these times and enlightenment. And it's just been something that I'm curious about. Like what is your guys' take? What do you, I mean, I know it's at this point we don't really know, and it's important to just live our lives, but I'm just curious what your guys' wisdom and thoughts are where that's concerned.
What immediately comes to mind is, in the same way we were just saying that so humanity as a whole is just a macrocosm of our individual lives. So if we think of us and our consciousness and how it evolves, we were just going over how you need discomfort as a catalyst for growth and wisdom, because you can't have wisdom and growth without duality of discomfort. You have to have it. Right. You have to have pain and suffering for joy and love. Otherwise, like we said, you'd be in Eden where there is no contrast, and then there's no growth, there's no progress, there's complete stagnation. So when it comes to the mass humanity, we go through trials as a species because it creates evolution and growth. Mm-hmm. So now, ideally, though, in the same way we were saying that as the individual consciousness grows, the problems become less and less, or not less and less. I mean, less and less barbaric and dramatic. I mean, I used to love history. And when I look back at history, we used to do the most bizarre shit, like really barbaric stuff. We'd rip people apart in public. We would have them compete and kill each other and get eaten by lions. You know, think of the Romans. Like, we used to do the most bizarre things as humans. So, you know, in endless wars, the wars were way more barbaric. We'd rape, pillage, and put people's heads on spikes, like weird shit, if you really think about it.
Right.
So if we look at humanity, the good news is, are we continuing as humanity to go through crises? Yeah, we actually always have been. Now, the scale and the barbaricism of them, if that's a word, the level and like the degree of them is getting more and more refined. But yeah, we should expect that we'll always be going through crises as a species, because it's actually, it's what we all need to evolve as a collective, just like we need it in our individual life. So it's the microcosm and macrocosm concept. So I think it's wise to always just know that, again, if you lean into crisis as expected, you're not as thrown off by it. You're like, yeah, we got some war going on in Ukraine right now. Yeah, what else is new? Like, of course we do. Right. Because that's creating a catalyst for a bunch of evolution. You know how many people are evolving because of that?
I think, is it the Chinese word for crisis means opportunity? Is that
possibly?
I think so, yeah.
When we look at world events, think of, okay, we went through this COVID stuff. Like, again, how much evolution, a lot of evolution came out. You know how many people changed from that crazy experience? So I think the wisest thing we can do as humans is say, whatever the hell's going on out there, how can I facilitate this for my greatest wisdom? You can't go wrong. It's not like you're going to come out of that situation weaker. If you go into any crisis and you be like, all right, this crisis is here, it's going to be here, I should stop fighting and saying it shouldn't be here. I just got to accept it's here. Just like we were saying in the personal relationships. And then just say, cool, how can I learn from this? How can I develop my wisdom, my growth, my actions? How can I evolve through this experience? If we were all doing that, we would be an enlightened species overnight.
Right. Well,
I have two things to... Okay, go ahead.
No, you asked.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the two things I was going to say about if there's going to be a big event is, number one is that when your own theme of consciousness is in, the higher states, how you experience such events are completely different from somebody else. So we are essentially all having our own version of reality, even though we're coexisting on this planet. For example, not to brag, but kind of to brag, like the 2 year of COVID was like some of the best years we've experienced in our life, like financially, like liberating, like there were people who went through really hard times with that. But I mean, like it was a very magical time for us. We bought our first home. We our business flourished in ways we've just never seen before. We had new experiences spiritually, we went to India during COVID, it was just a beautiful time for us. So not to say bragging like this, but to present that there could be extreme world things happening, and depending on your theme of consciousness, the way you experience it from your vantage point will be from your theme of consciousness. So if you are in love, you're going to experience love no matter what is happening globally. If you are in freedom, you will experience freedom, because these are inner states of being. And that's why it's liberating, because they are separate from the external reality. They are inside. So it doesn't actually matter what the world goes for, because for you, it will always be a match of your vibration. So when you are in enlightenment and ecstasy, enlightenment means ecstatic bliss. So when you're in ecstatic bliss and the world is going through whatever, you won't not be in ecstatic bliss just because of what's happening out there, because it's an inner experience that you cultivated through your spiritual willpower. So it doesn't matter what's happening. So that's the beautiful part about it.
Right.
And then the second thing I wanted to say is that there is actually a theory within yoga philosophy about the times and patterns of humanity, like prophecy, kind of the same as we see with Christianity and the resurrection and second coming and all these things that exist in Eastern philosophy as well. And what always comforts me is that I know that in Christianity, it should feel like a good feeling, the idea of a second coming, or an event that, kind of takes the evil off of the planet and starts fresh, but it always feels very doomsday and scary for some reason. It's supposed to be this good thing, but everybody feels really scared of it. Mm-hmm. In the Eastern philosophy, there's these different time periods called yugas, and there's thousands of years long of humanity existing through a time period. And it has to do with where we are in the universe. So just like we have a solar system and we're revolving around the sun, the concept is that our solar system is revolving around an inner sun. So it's microcosm of macrocosm, right? Mm-hmm. And that we just haven't figured this out yet scientifically, but that there's a sun that the solar system,
we could say our galaxy
is spiraling through and going through the same process on a macro scale. And as we move away from the center, we go into outer darkness. And as we come closer to the inner sun, we go into states of peacefulness and enlightenment as humanity. Mm-hmm. And so we've already finished the cycle of going to outer darkness, the Kali Yuga. We're coming out of it and we're heading toward the center again. And so everything that's happening on our planet right now is going to a yuga or a chapter. We've just finished Kali Yuga. I think it was like a couple hundred years ago. And now we're in, I forget what the name of Dwapada Yuga. I forgot the name of it, but we're moving toward the center. And there are going to be events that happen, but they are bringing us to peace. They're bringing us to enlightened, humanity. And we're actually moving toward goodness, not away from it. And so that always really comforts me.
Yeah. The good news is consciousness is always, its nature is to always evolve. So we never have to worry that it could ever go the other way. Every event is always an evolutionary event.
Right. I've been fascinated recently with like the idea of like us evolving into our light bodies, right, through enlightenment. And I don't know if either of you have ever, I'm sure you have, Matt, like heard people talk about junk DNA and how the majority of our DNA they call junk DNA. And this idea that through enlightenment, we activate this DNA and step into our light bodies. And so I don't know if that's like a prophecy for humanity through like enlightenment through yoga, or, I just the way my mind works sometimes is that supposed to be?
That it totally exists in the yoga philosophy as well.
It's actually very similar to the Mormon philosophy also, that it's the same in yoga of as we keep evolving spiritually, we access new layers of godliness in a sense. So you do evolve into it would make sense, right? If we look at evolution on the planet, why would we, again, I always love looking at the macrocosm, microcosm level, because back when I was like super into quantum physics and stuff, we start to see that the universe is filled with fractals, which is this concept of like the bigger thing, containing the smaller degree. Like, for example, the solar system looks just like an atom, right? And so it's like, if you zoom into that, you would notice more layers of the same thing. And when you zoom out, they actually keep looking like layers upon layers of the same pattern. So in the same way, if we look at evolution of species on our own planet, wouldn't it make sense that on a spiritual and eternal level, that we just keep evolving to even greater types of beings that create planets instead of just homes? Or we create, instead of families, we're creating an entire species.
We got to tell you guys.
Would it make sense that we keep evolving in our capabilities and our abilities? That would be fun, right? If your progress, remember the topic of progress, of course, wouldn't we eternally progress in our capabilities? Just like when we were kids, it was cool being a kid, but like as an adult, I can do so many more cool things. I have so many more abilities because I'm more mature, I'm more wise. So imagine 20 more lifetimes. I can't even imagine how cool my consciousness would be. That guy's going to be super smart, or girl, or whatever the heck I am at that point.
Right.
You get the point though, is like, it's exciting to think that we are actually always going to enjoy greater and greater degrees of capacities and abilities.
I got to say, because, I study religions, like that's my thing. And the Mormon philosophy is actually very similar to Hinduism. And I became really fascinated by it because I saw so many similarities with theories of, the celestial kingdoms. They all exist in Hinduism.
Kingdoms,
all of it. It's all.
The kingdoms are actually themes of consciousness.
Yeah, they're the same. It's the same. Oh, wow. It's the same things. And all I've seen through studying religions is that the same story is being told in all the different cultural ways.
And then of course it's being expressed differently.
Yeah, there's so much truth in all of it. And of course there's distortions as well. But
so funny. So good.
There's so much Hindu influence in Mormonism. I could literally just write a whole book about it. It is amazing to me.
I would love to have that discussion with you one day. I would, because I was just explaining to Tiff, we were talking about the idea of what we were talking about with the root chakra and financial well-being, how this idea that you just stay up here in your crown chakra and you just imagine it and it'll come. No, you have to work down through your root and then back up. And because that's what will give you access to divinity. And I said to Tiff, it's kind of like the concept of the atonement. Like you have to do all you can, and then that's where God comes in to make up the difference. But you have to do. It's not about sitting around and just daydreaming all day and smoking a bunch of weed and listening to great music. Although that's fun, but it's not going to get it done.
I highly recommend going on. I don't know if you guys have heard of Gaia, but it's like okay. There's a series on there about the Essenes. And I forget what the name of the show is, but if you look up like Gaia,
I've definitely heard about the Essenes.
Yeah. It's ascension Christianity, basically. So you could think yoga, ascension, consciousness. It's Christianity through the lens of consciousness. And it was the original Christianity pre-Christ.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's ascension Christianity. Yeah. And I think if anybody has religious trauma with Christianity or Mormonism, and you still feel like this yearning in your heart that like there's something there with Jesus, and there's something there with like there is, but there's also all this stuff and baggage with church that you're not want to associate with an institution, look into Ascension Christianity, because it's like the original teachings of Jesus about, ascension. And what I always say is like the Mormon religion actually is a total offspring, because it's not the same as other Christians. Like Mormons are not, it's Ascension Christianity. And it does have a lot of consciousness in it. And I know that there's a lot of bureaucity in the institution.
Unfortunately, a lot of shame and guilt.
And I know there's some weird stuff and all this stuff, but it's in there. It's in there.
Yeah. And what I figured out is you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
You take what works. You take the truth that's there, and you don't have to throw away the stuff that you find burdensome or traumatic, right? That caused the trauma. But you can also acknowledge the thing that we talked about earlier, that trauma may have been the thing that propelled you to greater growth. Exactly. And that's okay too.
Yep.
Wow. Well, we are at 2 hours, you guys. And I told you we would stick at 2 hours. I'm without words of gratitude for how the path you guys have shown us. And I was telling Tiff, like, it's really weird to me. I'm 50 years old, and all of my gurus right now are all these younger people that have spent their lives figuring something out that, like, I haven't figured out. and I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful that you guys have, and I've said it again, but you've done the work that you needed to be there, not just for us, but for so many souls that are on this journey and want to find happiness. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. We're so honored, and we love you guys. We're so grateful that we know you and to just be in community with you.
A lot of time together.
Great.
I'm totally stoked to be teaching yoga. Okay. So for anybody listening, really easy follow the Yoga Couple on Instagram. Their book, The Inner Work, is really easy to find on Amazon. How many copies have you guys sold of The Inner Work? Self-published, right?
Yeah, I
know,
guess
like
somewhere around
15,000.
Yeah, probably getting around like 20,000 at this point.
Yeah.
So amazing. Like, and you encouraged us to, we've been going down this journey of writing a book ourselves about our own experiences and our own journey. And so your encouragement in our last class was a reminder to do that, but to finish that work, because we started it. But the Yoga Couple, anything else you guys have to share or anywhere?
Yeah, if you guys are interested in studying with us and want to join Tiffany and Brad in the training, you're more than welcome. It's sacredyogainstitute.com. And that's one of the best ways to, go deep really into if you really liked this conversation, then you would definitely love it. You would love it. So.
Okay.
We obviously highly, highly recommend that you guys do that.
Yeah.
It's mostly it's all online really, but it's the most in-depth training that I've ever been through. And I have
300 hours.
300 hours of yoga teacher training. So amazing. I love it.
Well, the work is never done.
You.
So thank you guys for showing us and sharing with us your wisdom. Namaste. So
Namaste.
Have a great day.
This podcast was brought to you by True Agency Real Estate. If you want to check us out, our website is www.utahtrueagency.com, and we are also on all of the socials.